First of all, thank you everybody for coming today. This is a very happy day to have a program on bridging Silicon Valley and Latin America. We are very honored to have Matias Zegers visiting Silicon Valley from Chile, and Dan Green, who's been involved with Latin America for many, many years, and he's a lawyer here in Silicon Valley. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to do a short introduction of who they are and their bios, and then they're going to talk a little bit about issues that are happening with startups in Latin America, and what are the challenges of bringing them here, and what are the legal issues involved. But primarily, we want this to be an interactive session. We encourage people from the audience to ask questions. We assume many of you are entrepreneurs. A lot of you are from Latin America, are seeing the challenges of doing business here. So we're going to leave half an hour for questions. And please, this is supposed to be a very interactive session. So having said this, I'm going to start with Matias. Matias Zegers is a professor of corporate law at Universidad Catolica, and he's a partner at the law firm Bahamondez, Alvarez Zegers. It's a very, very good firm, and they represent many of the startups, and they do a lot of the deals in Chile. And he's also the executive director of the Corporate Governance Center at Universidad Catolica, so we know each other doing other programs for public directors, both from the Rock Center and Catolica, so we interact a lot, and it's been a great pleasure and honor to deal with Matias over the years. Dan is been long time involved with Chile. We actually go back to the same firm in Chile back in early 2000s, late 90s. But he worked many years at Wilson Sonsini, which is one of the leading law firms in Silicon Valley doing venture deals. He moved to Goodwin Procter and is now with Greenberg Traurig, and is a shareholder of the firm. And he has specialized, and he's representing a lot of Latin American companies here in Silicon Valley, and I think he's unique in that practice in Silicon Valley. And so we are very happy to have him here talk about these issues. So with that, I want to leave and start with sort of, the first questions and start with that. So first of all, Matias, how is Latin America today? How do you see the startup scene and venture capital deals, and what are your thoughts?
Well, the ecosystem has consistently been growing in the last years, although it's something new for the region. I mean, the venture capital industry has been here in Silicon Valley for the last 40 years. In Latin America, we started to work seriously on the venture capital industry like 5 years ago, which is almost nothing. I mean, there were a couple of cases in the bubble of 2000, but after that there was a drought, and now it's picking up again. One interesting thing, in my opinion, right now is that most of the startup companies are immediately looking at Silicon Valley. Say, well, we want to start a new company, we want to be entrepreneurs now, but we want to replicate the model there. And that's interesting because obviously if you have companies modeled after what has happened here in the last years, you will probably at least reduce some transaction costs first, and also you will have some more chances to succeed. Because if you start to talk later on with new investors, etc., well, they will be talking the same language, and that's something different. Besides that, we see a more entrepreneurial spirit. Teams fully committed with the companies. That's something relatively new. Some years ago, was a kind of a part-time job for many people, and obviously at the end, I mean, it doesn't work. So fully committed teams with innovative ideas, with growing ecosystems, and also with more firms focused on Latin America, either local firms. There are 2 or 3 in Chile, there are a couple in Argentina, more in Brazil, and that's basically in the region. And now we are seeing more firms based here in Silicon Valley that are opening subsidiaries, mainly in Brazil right now. You know, I know Sequoia, Redpoint, etc. They are going to Brazil. Mostly, in my opinion, focus on Brazilian startup companies, but also with some focus in the rest of the region.
Yeah, and from my vantage point here in Silicon Valley, and I've had the opportunity to work a lot with Matias, I'm very bullish about the region, and as a whole, entrepreneurship is in vogue in Latin America right now. If I look at sort of the three categories of things that you need in order to build a healthy entrepreneur ecosystem, human capital, financial capital, and the environment, and the ideas in which that environment can interact, I see improvement and significant velocity in each of those areas. What's interesting about Chile in particular is what Matias was saying. The Chilean entrepreneur tends to think broad, big, global, that attracts VCs. Brazilians have the luxury of a large internal market. They tend to think Sao Paulo, Rio, maybe then growing in Brazil. And I think what's most interesting is, from a legal perspective and from an environmental perspective, there's a lot more information nowadays available to entrepreneurs to allow for a frictionless capital process, positioning themselves well to present to Silicon Valley venture investors that we deal with. 2 or 3 years ago, there wasn't that wealth of information, and nowadays, you know, you have Chilean VCs and Colombian VCs that I talked with last week thinking about investing directly in Delaware entities with US-style legal documentation. That helps position the company well for future fundraising.
So, part of the theme today is what do you see as the common, pitfalls or issues that your clients are facing that are from Latin America here? What would you sort of say to them to focus on, or what are the issues that they have to look really early on so that they do a good transition?
Yeah.
And also, is it good to do a transition? I mean, how do you pitch them the advantages of Silicon Valley? Why should they come here? And what are the cultural issues?
Yeah, great questions. I'll add my thoughts and let Matias weigh in. I think the advantages of Silicon Valley for most entrepreneurs in many businesses are pretty self-evident, right? The velocity of the ideas, the fact that capital is accessible, the fact that there's this open mentality here about sharing ideas that you don't necessarily or historically didn't find in Latin America. You know, the fact that you don't ask for an NDA at a cafe when you're exchanging ideas. Those advantages are significant, but not every single Latin American entrepreneur wants to come to the Valley. And when you're embarking on a venture, you need to project forward. You need to think, where is my ultimate liquidity event going to be? Who am I going to be selling to? How am I going to position myself to be attractive to that buyer or to an IPO? And then before that, where am I going to raise money? Where am I going to have my operations? Where am I going to hire my people? And the answers to those questions will dictate a lot of things, like legal structure, like should I be setting myself up in the US? The focus today is really on the bridge building between Silicon Valley and Latin America. If your goal is to come here and position yourself for an exit in the US, there are very specific things that you can be doing to set yourself up for that. One is, from a legal perspective, making sure your corporate house, your legal entity is formed, has protected its IP and its assets, has taken care to adhere to labor law compliance, and any number of issues that can scare off a VC. When I talk to VCs that are first getting interested in Latin America, I have one in mind that I met with 2 months ago. They didn't know Latin America very much. They're interested in Brazil. They're interested in Chile and Colombia. Curiosity, but when they peel back the onion, they get spooked by things like, gosh, this company has 20 employees. They've never hired them as employees. They're all contractors. There's a big accumulated liability to the state for severance pay, for any number of legal issues like that. So you need to make sure that you're taking care of those housekeeping items so you present yourself well.
Yeah, I agree with you, and those are very key questions. As Dan said, I mean, the three basic issues to take into consideration are what's happening with employees. At the beginning, most of the startup companies started in a sort of a friendly way. All of us are friends, so we'll start this company. This is something relevant. We will be the next Facebook of the world. So all of us will be immensely rich later on. So we'll start to develop this relationship and to build up the company. But you have to think about it. What do you want? And to start to think, well, should I hire these guys from minute zero? Do I have the IP rights duly assigned to the company? Do I have, for example, an interesting stock option pool for the next steps of this company since the beginning, with an adequate vesting program? Those are, the three basic questions that a founder should consider at the beginning of the company. Besides that, right now in Latin America, there are three ways to think about, the future development of the company. One is to say, well, I will start my company in, my country, in whatever it is, for X, Y, or Z reasons, and I will test my product because it's cheap to do it, probably down there in Latin America definitely compared to the Valley. Start the development of the product and immediately say, well, I have to gain traction and to gain attraction as well from potential investors. So there are three ways to do it. One is to immediately try to grow within the region. And that has two ways as well. One is to go to Brazil. Why is that? Because basically today Latin America has two sub-regions. One is Brazil itself, it's a continent in itself, and then you have the rest of Latam. So go immediately to Brazil. Brazil is a difficult environment, to do business in, because of some administrative regulations, because of tax implications, because you would probably need some local talent to help you with the company. It's huge. It's another world. Second option then is what to start to do to create subsidiaries, incorporate subsidiaries in, let's say, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Mexico, etc., as a way to gain this traction. Or if you think, since the beginning that your product is fantastic, that your company, will hit a home run almost immediately, then the third option is to come here, to the Valley. To show that you have this great idea and to try, to raise some money directly here to gain momentum and to get the development that you need for the company. Those are the three paths.
But do you think would you say that most people are looking first to Brazil and the rest of Latin America before looking here? And we're talking of startups in the technology space, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to be clear, but is that a trend that you're looking at?
Well, it depends. It depends because Brazil is huge as a market. So you know that if you are successful there, then your liquidity event, as Dan was mentioned, will probably be much more successful. But it's much more expensive. You need a lot of capital to do business in Brazil. So other people decide to go directly to start in other countries to gain that attention from the market and to aim to that liquidity event. So that means also that that should be taken in consideration when you talk about legal corporate structure, because if you are aiming the U.S., it makes a lot of sense to have a holding company. Well, there are other tax considerations there, but here, probably a C corp, and then subsidiaries down there. Other option is to have a holding company in places like Chile, because you can take advantage of the double taxation treaties, the free trade agreements, etc., and to use one of those countries, in this case Chile, as a regional hub to consolidate your regional results. So it depends on the company and the path that the company wants to follow.
So what do you think, Dan, we've talked about it, the trend, you looking at many companies coming here, what do you think has changed? From today to 5 years ago, every time I talk to you, you tell me about all these deals that are happening. companies coming here. I mean, this is something completely new. I remember 5 years ago, there wasn't even one company here. Right. And now it's changed. I mean, what is going on?
There's a lot of things that have changed in the environment that are accelerating the flow of companies from the region to Silicon Valley. It's a little bit like the immigrant phenomenon when somebody moves from one country to another and then invites friends and and tells them, gosh, things are really good here. Why don't you come and join us? And then it becomes a viral effect. There's a bit of that going on. There's a bit of infrastructure building that's happened with the governments getting involved in a healthy way. There's a gentleman in the audience, Cristóbal Barros, from the Chile, California Council. There's, Colombia has just opened Pro-Colombia office in San Francisco. Brazil has offices. Consulates are getting involved. So there's a lot of activity, Corfo, Startup Chile, that are accelerating the process, and recognition in the capital community that there are attractive investment opportunities in the region. And also, we're seeing the fruits of universities, paying off. The fact that we had a significant uptick in non-U.S. students coming to do doctoral degrees, master's degrees, some of whom are returning, some of whom are staying. We have several clients who have emerged from Stanford and beyond to grow their companies here. So it's a number of things, and you've got the support infrastructure here. You have people like Matias and myself who can help get companies off the ground. You have accountants, you have marketing and sales personnel who have greater and greater involvement with Latin America, all of whom add to the value of the proposition of a company.
Yeah, and there is, I think, another issue there is the reputational effect. Some years ago, somebody in Latin America that started a company and failed, which was highly possible, was a really bad and sad story. I mean, for him, for his professional career. Right now that has changed for good. I think it's something. Hey, look at the CV of this guy. He has started some companies, some failed, some were good, successful stories, and that means a lot. I mean, it makes a difference now. So everybody, and when I was at the university, nobody wanted to start a company. I mean, it was not in the world. It was not a possibility. I mean, right now we see our students down there. I mean, it's a good option for them.
And so, what do you think? I mean, what kind of recommendation would you give to people and your clients today? I mean, when you see them start a company, I remember when back in 10 years ago, people didn't believe they could come to Silicon Valley. It's very hard to come here. And so today, I see many more people believing in that. Do you think it's just a product of successful stories that people said, well, we can do this? Do you think it's a combination of the government, universities? I mean, and the flip side is, what made the VCs here change their vision of Latin America? Do you think there are structural issues?
I think there are macroeconomic issues. There are prevailing tailwinds that are helping get VCs excited. Growing middle class, the fact that Brazil, Colombia, other countries have their macroeconomic house in order for the first time in a considerable period of time. The fact that you've got smartphone penetration, you've got social media opening up a vast amount of information to would-be entrepreneurs that 20 or 30 years ago wouldn't have been entrepreneurs. And then you've got the viral effect of people coming here and using the example of other non-US communities, the Israeli community, the Chinese and Indian community as examples, with obvious differences, but examples of success stories as well.
Okay.
And the power of instant information. I mean, all of us have access to instant information about what's going on in other places. So you can read, you almost can feel, you can experience, what's going on in other places. And in this regard, I think that the entrepreneurial ecosystem is very generous. I I mean, everybody shares their stories, either good or bad, I mean, successful or failures. And that improves a lot, the chances to be successful in the next one. I mean, you have access. I mean, you can email today, I know, whoever who has been successful in the region, Celao Casares, Oscar Yertonson, I mean, other cases, and you will probably, I mean, meet them in a very short period of time, and they will share with you, I mean, their stories.
And capital is, the capital community is becoming much more open to cross-border activity. You see that in the public markets, you see that with the merger of stock exchanges, and you're seeing that slowly, a bit behind, but slowly in the private capital markets as well. And you saw it with the fact that the VCs have opened offices in China and India and are setting up dedicated funds and structures to invest directly in those countries, Israel as well. You will eventually, I believe, see that with Latin America as well. It may take some time. While we're in this transition period, you're going to see investment structures that more look like U.S. typical structures that aren't as tax advantageous.
So how do you look Latin America next 2-5 years? I mean, what do you think? What do you project in terms of the future, at least in the entrepreneurial ecosystem? Can you make such a
I see more VCs from Silicon Valley with presences on the ground locally. What
about local VCs?
I see an increasing development of local VCs. There are a handful active in Chile. There are a handful active in Brazil and Argentina. I see those growing. If I were an investor, the holy grail right now is to be able to combine Spanish-speaking Latin America into one seamless market where you can tap into deal flow, and you have local partners on the ground in places like Mexico and Chile and Peru and Colombia and Argentina, and you can source deals that way and invest in a tax-advantaged way. Brazil being a completely different category unto its own. But and I see continuing an increasing amount of interactivity between Silicon Valley and Latin America.
Yeah, there will be more interconnection also between the VC firms, I think. I mean, either local and Silicon Valley firms. I think that there will be more co-investments, between local and Silicon Valley firms in local companies. And that's something interesting as well, because the learning curve for the local firms will be lower in terms of that they will learn faster how things are done here. I mean, remember that most of the funds in Latin America, they have a private equity background, and that's something which is not that good, in the sense that most of the investors there, they want a specific return rate. I mean, some things more applicable to the private equity industry than to the venture capital industry. So they are trying to learn, they want to learn, but still, I mean, you can see it and you can feel it in the legal documents, in the term sheets, when they start to negotiate those documents, that I mean, you still have to explain many things. So for us, I think in Latin America, to have common standards and to have firms looking to Silicon Valley to try to apply the same things down there, I mean, it's great because reduces time and reduces transaction costs.
But all of this is premised and has to be premised on exits, on the cycle being closed. Sure. And there needs to be validation of people's hard work and energy and investment. And in Latin America right now, there are few exits. People are still talking about exits that are over a decade old. And we need more and more visible exits. The media, in some cases, plays a very important role in celebrating exits. They have to be legitimate exits, but the media, like in Chile, is very active about doing that. That helps make entrepreneurship, a sexier profession these days, and that's important. But you also need to think, Latin America is. With the new capital-efficient business models that are available today to launching businesses, you can, as a founder and as an investor, make a very nice return in a sale between $20 and $50 million. Not everyone needs to be the next Instagram or Facebook. So, that model is applicable to a lot of companies in Latin America.
Okay. Well, I think we should open up for questions. The idea is to have, the judgment of Matias and Dan for the entrepreneurs in the room and ask all the questions that you have. So we have microphones, if you can just go there and turn them on and ask, just because it's being filmed. I think below. Let's see.
Hablamos en voz alta. Okay, so my question.
It works.
Yeah, it's working now. All right, my question has to do with the previous question of why this phenomenon has happened in the last 5 years of having so many entrepreneurs come into the Valley and try to make it work from Latin America. And I think there is a factor that was not mentioned, which possibly is the most important one. And I'm going to refer just to Chile. The university systems in Chile have created in the last 5 years incubation centers and centers for IP protection. And they, after 5 years, have begun to learn. And much of the learning has to do with the proper selection of what is a breakthrough technology. So the quality of innovation has increased. And that is central to those ideas being funded. There is a tendency in Latin America for evolutionary improvements, which are fine, but they don't attract a lot of capital, and especially not venture capital. And so that factor, I think, is central. And it's not over. There are still ideas that have not been properly screened. And yet, they get some funding. The other thing is, the amount of venture capital in Latin America is minuscule compared with the Valley. It is extremely difficult for those firms that are startups to get a few $1 million. $50,000 is a lot of money there, and it doesn't get you anywhere.
So just to follow up, what, if any, is your relationship in terms of dealings, and how do you see universities working this IP protection and spin-offs? And I mean, is that something that you see a difference?
Well, the last point, yes, definitely. I mean, IP protection is in the roadmap and is very significant right now. At least I can talk about Universidad Catolica. I mean, it's one of the main focus to keep increasing the number of licenses and patents, et cetera, et cetera. So it's definitely a very important issue right now. Although I'm a little bit more skeptical about the relevance of incubators, accelerators. Right now, I mean, I haven't seen a direct correlation, between the work of those incubators with, later rounds of financing. Okay. And as a matter of fact, most of the entrepreneurs have been very critical of the behavior of some of the incubators down there. I know that some of them are changing the model, and they are, I mean, very open-minded about it. For example, I think in Cubo, I'm sorry that I'm being quite subjective about it because it belongs to the university. But I mean, they are doing very, very interesting things. They are sending people over here to spend some months in different programs, etc. So, I mean, they are learning as well. But so far, in my opinion, they haven't been that helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of room to grow. I think there's been a lot of learning. A lot of the VCs, or some of the VCs that are active in Chile have been active in promoting best practices and reaching out to the Office of Technology Licensing at the universities here locally. There needs to be more of that. One side note on a common pitfall that I see startups fall into from a patent perspective, IP perspective. If you have a startup that has a patentable idea, and not every startup has patentable ideas, you need to be very careful about how you approach that, because the US is one of the very few countries that has this kind of window of a grace period where if you launch your product, you offer your product or service for sale, you have 12 months to patent it. And many other countries in the world, and I believe Chile is one of them, you have no grace period. Once you offer it for public consumption or sale, you cannot patent it. Your own product invalidates the application. So you need to be very careful about this. I see this a lot with companies that have launched in the last 24 months.
Okay.
Hi, I have some questions regarding early stages, and one, it's what happened with self-employment and visa. That I don't know, some of the entrepreneurs we have no idea how to proceed. And then again, back to intellectual property. There's all this cultural difference, and also like rules, protections, secrecy, and all that stuff. And also how this startups can be helped to protect before they get investment, because we all know lawyers are somehow not cheap, especially if you're entrepreneur before funding. What will be advices on how to proceed if you don't have funding? You have a protectable ADS. What should we do?
Yeah, I'll take it first, and then Matias, you can weigh in. I'll address your IP question first. There's a lot of things you can be doing on the early stages to be thinking smartly about protecting your IP. First and foremost, as you hire people, whether they be consultants, whether they be folks that you consider developers or not, make sure they sign a IP assignment agreement. Make sure you have a corporate entity. Make sure they have assigned the IP that they developed for you to that entity. So everything is in the house. That is important. And the US has a very broad concept of IP, and they have a very broad concept of who should be signing those agreements. So you will be routinely asked by investors later on and by acquirers, has everyone signed that sort of agreement? And if you can say yes, it makes your life a lot easier. Use NDAs judiciously. There are times when it's appropriate to ask for an NDA, and there are times when it can push people away. In the Valley, at least, there's sort of a code of NDAs, and in general, VCs don't sign NDAs except in certain circumstances, but you need to do your homework. You need to contact most VCs with integrity. If you contact them and they feel like there's a potential competitive threat, they have a portfolio investment that is in or around the same space, they'll tell you that up front, but you can't assume that. And if that's the case, and you know, all VCs have their list of portfolio investments on their webpage, and so you can do that, and if there's that risk of competitive threat, or then you ask for an NDA, or you don't even contact them. If you're talking to a strategic investor, if you're talking to a potential competitor, or somebody that you think could potentially be in the same space, an NDA is appropriate. But yeah.
Yeah. And regarding IP rights, Dan mentioned something that is really important. Say that the U.S. system is more friendly for entrepreneurs. So, I mean, my suggestion would be to try to protect your rights here, especially if you're aiming to raise money, to raise funds here, to get financed here. It's easier, I mean, for potential investors, will be easier to understand, I mean, the extent that of the IP rights that you have. And regarding the other two things, I mean, these cultural barriers, etc. I mean, right now, I think that there is an increasing local ecosystem in each country in Latin America. So get support for them. I mean, that's an important thing. You will probably, I mean, easily you will get 2, 3, I mean, 5, perhaps 10 persons of contact, and you will be able to chat with them and to exchange experiences, I mean, good and bad, about the country, etc. So you will be able to sort them out, I think, and you will not need a significant amount of time trying to understand the local system there. And well, regarding the third point, I think in Latin America, generally speaking, perhaps except Brazil right now, it's not that hard. I mean, to get self-employed. I mean, to incorporate a company, to get self-employed, and to get a visa. Although there are always very frustrating administrative barriers there. I mean, in many of the countries, you will need a tax ID number, and to get the tax ID number, you will need somebody down there to give. I mean, you will need a formal address to open a bank account. Later on, you will have to be physically there, you know, to operate some things and to give you, you know, it's really frustrating and takes time. But I mean, if you get the right help from the local ecosystem, you will probably, you know that you will have to invest some time there, but you will be able to sort it out.
The question was maybe the other way, like for Latin American entrepreneurs to come to the U.S. and to
Okay. So what?
Yeah.
How do usually your clients? What do you suggest in visa? Can they come? Can they have an investment threshold?
Yeah, there are, and I'm not an expert in immigration, but I see it enough that I mean, there's a handful of visas that are widely used. Tim Delias, an entrepreneur in the audience, just went through the process. There's the L1, there's the L2. In some cases, for treaty companies like Chile, there's the EB5. The general principle is the more formality and dressing up you can put on the company, and the more capital and job generation that you can show in the company, the easier it is to get the visa. And if you, I can't remember, $500,000 and 5 jobs that you're going to create in the U.S. opens up a visa. So you know, you need to show a viable business in general.
Yeah, with respect to IP protection, there is a common misconception that patents confer IP protection. What they confer is value, tangible value, in valuation of the startup. They don't offer protection. Protection comes from successful litigation, protecting your IP if a major multinational decides to infringe it. And that's the only thing that offers protection.
I mean, yeah, there's offensive and defensive uses of a patent, right? And for the most part, it is defensive. Some companies use it for offensive purposes. There are dedicated companies today that are, you know, sometimes referred to as trolls, that simply use their patent portfolio to accumulate more and to go out and monetize by suing for infringement. And you have to realize what type of business do you have? Is it a business where a patent A is achievable and B, there is a lot of value to that patent? And particularly in the technical and hard sciences, that is almost always the case. In the internet, less so.
And happens something similar with NDAs. I mean, we were talking. I mean, it's basically a defensive weapon, although more limited than a patent, obviously. But
my point was that it takes a lot of money to protect IP, and most entrepreneurs learn the hard way about that fact.
Yeah.
And it's something that you have to keep in mind. In fact, the concept that I was going to offer for Latin America is that governments like that of Chile could, through Corfo, offer a fund for IP protection. But you have to marry that with a proper selection of what you're going to protect. Some things don't deserve protection. But a startup company seldom ever has the money to defend in an infringement lawsuit.
Yeah. The one other point I'd like to make on patents is patents today are a numbers game in many cases. It's an arms race. And you look at the Googles and you know, the large companies of the world, even Facebook, they're acquiring enormous portfolios of patents. Why? Because patents, invariably, if they're litigated, oftentimes don't stand up to that scrutiny, and they get invalidated. And so if you have 10 patents in and around a particular invention, generally speaking, and 8 of them get invalidated, but 2 stick, then you're in a much stronger position. So the patent portfolio is driving a lot of M&A activity in the Valley these days.
Mm.
If I could add one more thing to something Matias was saying earlier, which is knowing the ecosystem in these countries is critical. And it's, at least in Chile, which is my experience, it's very small. There are 2 law firms there that you could potentially deal with. There are 2 venture firms that invest in biotech.
Matias would like to think that.
I agree with him.
It's not very many, and they all know each other, and they know how it works. And if you are in that ecosystem, you're okay. And if you're not, you might as well just sit in your hotel room. It is irrelevant. So that's one point. Another point is the point with respect to the universities. My experience is that, and again, this is biotech, is that most people are paid there about a third, and I'm talking Chile again, what people are paid here. And that applies right on up to the very highest levels. Well, I exclude lawyers, of course, but but the doctors, the people who manage companies and all that stuff, it's definitely less. So my experience is that I'm able to have a clinical trial happen there that would cost me $20,000 a patient, and I can spend about $5 to do the same thing in Chile, and have enthusiastic doctors who aren't doing 12 other trials at the same time. And the guy went to, University of Chile, and then he's got his MD from Wisconsin or Harvard or whatever. I mean, I'm getting a deal, is my point. And I couldn't possibly accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish with the amount of money I have in the U.S. Not possible. And with a sophisticated, interested, excited group of people. So.
And you have $1 trillion.
Can I ask Charles a question? How does the FDA and other regulatory agencies look upon Chilean?
Good.
So maybe just repeat the question for the audience.
George was asking how the FDA, and I would also add in that big pharma, how would they look at trials and other work, preclinical work done in Chile? And the answer is there are international standards for these sorts of things. It's good clinical practice, GCP, that so long as it's adhered to on the same basis as you would adhere to up here, and that's where you really need to bring in a lot of usually U.S. expertise, or at least expertise that mostly doesn't exist down there, to do things on that basis. And so it's a marriage of both. You're not, there are just some skill sets. I mean, certainly there are very competent neurologists, oncologists, and all that down there, but they have not had the experience working on FDA level trials. Could they have tried some trials and done some more things more informally? Yeah, but for something to be submissible to the FDA, it has to adhere to a very rigid set of guidelines. And the same set of guidelines applies irrespective of whether you're talking about big pharma or you're talking FDA, because they have to have those guidelines adhered to as well. So designing things up here and exercising the practice down there is essentially our deal. And we have actually been funded by a venture firm down there, Arus, which is a small venture firm. 3/4 of the money comes from the Chilean government, Corfo. And so part of our deal was we became a Chilean company, a Chilean parent. So it all seems to work so far. It hasn't been that long, but we're making good progress, and
Great.
I'm pretty excited about how it's going.
So maybe can you comment on salaries and how's that happening? Is that a differential, something that people here can take advantage of? I mean,
yeah, and it's a common trend. I think that we are seeing a lot of companies incorporating subsidiaries down there. Raising money either here or there, but immediately doing these stock exchanges to have holding companies here, and basically have the back office staff wherever the company is, some developers, some clinical trials, etc., down there because of the cost. So you can get much more value, and obviously your burn ratio goes that dramatically down, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah, leaving aside Brazil, the cost advantages are very significant, and it is a big strategic advantage that a Latin American entrepreneur has today. I sold a company a year ago where they had one employee in the US, the CEO, and they had 15 developers in a studio in Santiago. And that type of structure can be challenging to manage as the CEO, but if there's a trust factor there, then it's easier, and it's incredibly interesting and compelling economic proposition for companies.
And this situation is helping a lot the local ecosystems. Charles was mentioning Corfo in the case of Chile. And Corfo is pretty excited to receive, foreign researchers and to do these clinical trials in Chile because, it adds value to the country, right? And in other fields happens exactly the same thing. So you will probably face a very enthusiastic, environment, local environment to assist you at a governmental level. I mean, we are seeing this in Colombia, we are seeing this in Peru, we are seeing this in Chile, in Uruguay, etc. So it's something, it's a win-win situation.
I heard that it's very hard to hire engineers now in Chile.
Well, this is a scarcity, of engineers because, it's happening the same thing here. Right now, you are seeing that Facebook, Google, etc., they are going down there to hire local talent. So obviously, you will face more competition, but still there is some room to find, good local talent.
Great.
Thanks. I just came back from Chile about 2 weeks ago, and I was down there thanks to Cristobal Barros from the Consulate of Chile, that they supported us on getting down there, also bringing a delegation from the Greater San Jose Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And what I found out down there is that Santiago is the center of the world there in Chile. So we got away from Santiago and went down south to Temuco in the Araucanía, where there is about 15 universities and about 150,000 students at any one point, a lot of them engineers. I personally met with about 50 entrepreneurs there while I was there for 2 weeks, and they would come at 6 in the morning and meet with me. And their biggest question was, how do I get to Silicon Valley? What about the visa and everything else? And what we found as a chamber is that we were able to leverage our relationship with the U.S. Embassy to process their visas as a group. So 7 of them are coming here in about a month and a half to experience the environment, 3 to 6 months. Some of them are funded by CONADI actually because they're from indigenous descent. So some of their funding is coming from CONADI, some of the funding is coming from friends and family, other funding is coming from their own clients, and they're all in the technology business. So I think that the Chilean government is doing a great job in promoting this type of environments. And also what we found was that the attorneys and the lawyers, because I met with a lot of lawyers and attorneys down there, they're very interested in becoming venture capitalists themselves. And so we have about 3 lawyers that are willing to come to Silicon Valley to meet with people like yourself, Daniel, to sort of get a feeling of what it is to be a VC or an angel. But there's two ecosystems that are being developed independent of what the government is doing as well. The government is sort of getting things started, but we cannot depend on the government to continue. Some of the complaints that we had from the entrepreneurs about the incubadoras in UCT and Universidad Catolica, Temuco, and UFRO was that they were just so so heavily funded by government that they were doing all this unnecessary stuff to get them through the curricula of being an entrepreneur when they themselves are employees to the university. So that was the big complaint that a lot of entrepreneurs have. But I think that if you, Daniel and Matias, if you're up for it, I'd like to meet with you later and see if we can get these entrepreneurs here and get them into this environment. Matias, maybe I connect you with the attorneys in Temuco so that you can start in some sort of angel group down there as well. So you up for it?
Okay, good.
Any comment on regions and how deep is it in Chile? Or?
Well, there have been some interesting developments. I mean, as you know, for example, Endeavor, which is pretty strong in the region, they have some specific meetings in Puerto Varas, in the southern part of Chile, I mean, since several years ago. So there are some hubs as well. I mean, the northern part of Chile because of the mining companies. In the southern, yes, I mean, in Temuco, as you were saying, in Puerto Varas, in Concepcion. I mean, there are several universities all over the place, so it's booming. I mean, the ecosystem is growing, not only in Santiago, I agree with you. There are some successful stories, although I will say that most of the tech companies are in Santiago, related to agribusinesses, etc., are in the southern part of Chile, and related to mining companies are in the northern part of Chile.
Yeah, I would say that's the exciting thing about Chile today is it's historically been so concentrated in Santiago. I was at an Endeavor conference last week. Endeavor is an NGO that supports high-impact entrepreneurship in the developing world, and there were 4 candidates from Chile, and only 1 was from Santiago. 2 were from Antofagasta, and 1 was from the south. And there's a real push, particularly in the renewable energy space, for development of local application and technology to be solar and wind, and harnessing that for the energy needs of the country.
Great. Good.
So first of all, let me thank Evan for organizing everything. It's a great event. Thanks, Daniel and Matias. Pleasure to meet you, Matias. And my 2 questions have nothing to do, only I'm a lawyer, just like yourself, the 3 of you. My 2 questions have nothing to do with law. So if you are able to dress like a member of the government in Latin America, 3 recommendations to help to build a healthy, and that is the tricky question, healthy entrepreneurial system, not going too far away and not doing too less. So which is the equation to have that healthy ecosystem? And if you are an entrepreneur, which are the 3 recommendations that you will pick before you're coming here? Because I agree with Ruben, a lot of Chileans, and I'm sure that people from all over Latin America are eager to come here, but perhaps you're waiting too long and you're ready, or perhaps you're not ready. So what you have to take a hard look at before you're coming here?
Good question.
From the entrepreneur perspective, you need to really analyze what is the value that you're going to get out of a trip to Silicon Valley, and what can you bring to the table to offer to a partner, to an employee, to a source of capital. And I always counsel my companies, my clients from Chile, do a fact-finding mission first. I've seen this is another pitfall, where you think you have a good idea, you think you have a marketable product, you want to go out and raise capital, you take your first trip to Silicon Valley and you meet with 20 or 30 VCs or angel investors. You do a scattershot approach. You think you get them excited, and you get some good feedback, you take it away, you go back to your home country and you work on it. And 3 months later, you realize, gosh, my product wasn't ready for prime time. I shouldn't have shown it to the VCs, but now it's ready. Now, in 3 months from now, I'm gonna go back and and I'm going to show it again, and it's a cliched adage, but the first impression is very important when you're talking to a VC, and many times you won't get that second meeting. So you really need to be ready for prime time. Depends on the stage of your business. Are you trying to raise capital on the basis of a product, of an idea, or has the product launched and is there traction in the market? I was talking to an entrepreneur earlier about that, how challenging it is once you've launched a product to raise money on that, because then it's real. It's like, let me see your metrics. But you need to pick the right timing for when you want to approach people and make sure that you have a really solid either idea or product that's ready. From a government perspective, I love what Chile has done with Startup Chile. I love the fact that it's now open to Chilean entrepreneurs where it wasn't at the outset. I love what Corfo's trying to do. I think there's things around the margins that they could be improving. I think flexibility is the most important thing. Agility and flexibility. Corfo still takes, in my humble opinion, too long to make decisions for investments. The fact that I was talking to a VC in Chile the other day and they still can't use convertible notes under their Chilean funding guidelines. So there's things that can be improved, but in general, they're a role model for the rest of the region.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we were talking about this yesterday, so I'm sorry not to add many things here, but I mean, not to rush sometimes. I mean, you have to be sure about what you are doing. What's your product? What do you want to do? Where later on? How do you want to grow? How to monetize basically your company? So there are many questions before to start to visiting the local firms here, because probably you will only get one shot. So you have to take advantage of it, and that's very important. And another thing is to have the right team. I mean, that's the first question. I mean, if you see in front of you a passionate guy with the right team who has worked and thought about the product, etc., and fully committed, it makes a difference. At the end of the day, you will be facing a VC and you will meet with him for, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, perhaps, or even less. So you have to make an impression, and probably more than 50% of that impression is about the person, the team. That makes a difference when you can hear it. And from the government side, I think that Corfo has been very open-minded in terms to listen, in case of Chile, about what the local ecosystem thinks, and not only the local ecosystems. I mean, people like Dan here, I mean, has made several comments to them, and that's important to have people listening, or what the market needs, to keep growing and to keep developing the ecosystem. But this, as Dan said, I mean, it's a bit that sometimes takes too long. Corfo always says, well, we are managing public funds, so we need to follow some rules. And it's true. I mean, not Corfo is a state-owned agency, and only part of it is devoted to promote, startup companies. They have many other roles, so you will be facing, lawyers, old-style lawyers, for example, at the time that they review the documentation, etc., making some comments. I mean, absolutely no sense for these purposes. So it's a change of mentality. It takes time also, and I would love to have a separate agency to promote startup companies. I think that will be much more efficient in the long term.
You mean separate to Corfo?
Yeah, a sub-agency if you want. Yeah.
Another sub-agency?
Another one.
Wow. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, can I add a comment to the prior question in terms of what the government?
Maybe if you can just.
Hear me, or I need to I would like to share a comment in terms of what the government could do to stimulate the ecosystem. And I'm being asked that question often across Latin America, even from Argentina. I think the model should be invest and take a long-term view, measure.
30 minutes, 45 minutes, perhaps, or even less. So you have to make an impression, and probably more than 50% of that impression is about the person, the team. That makes a difference when you can hear it. And from the government side, I think that Corfo has been very open-minded in terms to listen, in the case of Chile, about what the local ecosystem thinks, and not only the local ecosystems. I mean, people like Dan here, I mean, has made several comments to them, and that's important to have people listening, or what the market needs, to keep growing and to keep developing the ecosystem. But this, as Dan said, I mean, it's a bit that sometimes takes too long. Corfo always says, well, we are managing public funds, so we need to follow some rules. And it's true. I mean, Corfo is a state-owned agency, and only part of it is devoted to promote, startup companies. And they have many other roles. So you will be facing, lawyers, old-style lawyers, for example, at the time that they review the documentation, etc., making some comments. I mean, absolutely no sense for these purposes. So it's a change of mentality. It takes time also, and I would love to have a separate agency to promote startup companies. I think that will be much more efficient in the long term.
You mean separate to Corf?
Yeah, a sub-agency if you want. Yeah.
Another sub-agency?
Another one.
Wow. Any other questions? Yes.
Can I add a comment to the prior question in terms of what the government?
Maybe if you can just.
Hear me, or I need to. I would like to share a comment in terms of what the government could do to stimulate the ecosystem. And I'm being asked that question often across Latin America, even from Argentina. I think the model should be invest and take a long-term view, measure, and celebrate. And it's clearly Chile is doing a lot of investment, a lot of activities. I am less certain about the measurements and taking the right measurements across sustained periods of time. And then finally, celebrate the successes and publish the failures. I mean, I have been often invited to do international evaluation of the incubators in Chile. And nobody wanted to hear the bad news. Okay? I mean, the incubators became intensive care hospitals of ventures that should have died long time ago. And they are being resurrected every year and pumped up with new subsidies, and therefore deforming the entrepreneurs to become experts on how to take every possible cent in the subsidies. And they are not incentives anymore. And that's not just in Chile, it's across the board. Okay? Because it's a baby. How can you kill a baby? Right? Because they take that vision in terms of what the venture is, when the venture is totally Darwinian system. Okay? And the best, if it's going to fail, the sooner the better. Okay? So I think that the model invest, measure, celebrate, and publish the failures, I think is what is going to help evolve the ecosystem over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, Silicon Valley, it was an accident, it's an aberration of nature, and didn't happen overnight. It took decades to happen. So this is my comment.
Thank you. Any?
May I add to that? I agree with those comments, but I think there is a reason for the shortcomings of incubators, and not just in Chile. This is throughout Europe as well, and in Latin America. The problem is that incubators from universities in particular are funded by universities, and so they're working for the faculty. They're not working for selecting the proper breakthrough technologies. They are marketing arms for the professors in different faculties. And that's not the role that they should play. So in Spain, they're called OTRIs, Offices of Technology Transfer of Innovation. And one of the things I work for the government of Spain, I recommended is take off the office because it's pure bureaucracy. And if you're incubating new businesses and innovations, you should worry about that innovation, not about marketing a given professor or producing pamphlets. And there is not enough of those incubators that grab the phone to validate the market. Nobody does that. No wonder those things keep being funded when they should have died long time ago.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope it was a great and valuable event. Thanks.
Thank you.